topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart.
Hello and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. My name is Bahia Yaksan. I'm a diversity educator and a core alignment coach, which means I support individuals and organizations in aligning their actions with their values. If you're interested in seeing samples of my diversity education trainings, learning how to step out of biases, patterns, and develop new ones that are far more inclusive, you can go to my website, which is knowwhatyouvantcoaching.wordpress.com. We have a great show tonight, but before I announce my guest, I want to thank our sponsors, and I'm going to read the sponsorship credits here. This program is brought to you by the City of Davis Arts and Cultural Affairs Program and the California Creative Corps, a pilot program funded by the City of Sacramento's Office of Arts and Culture and the California Arts Council, a state agency, as an engagement campaign designed to increase public awareness about issues of social justice, climate resiliency, and more. The Creative Corps program, backed by Governor Gavin Newsom and the state legislature, looks to increase public awareness on topics such as health and safety, water and energy conservation, climate mitigation, emergency preparedness, social justice, and civic and community engagement. Thank you to our sponsors. Today, my guest is Gregory Wada, and amazingly talented artist. And I'm going to read you his introduction. Gregory, come on out on screen while I'm reading. The title of this show is New Folk Music, Taiko in Asian America. And Gregory, please correct me if I mispronounce any of these names. New to me. I love trying to sound it out correctly. Never mind being corrected, though.
No problem. No.
Thanks for being here. Gregory is an instructor for Koyasan?
Yeah.
Koyasan Spirit of Children Taiko at the Northern California Koyasan Buddhist Temple, where he teaches youth and adult classes and directs the Kongo Gumi ensemble. He's the founder and director of the Davis Cherry Blossom Festival and works as the conference manager for the Taiko Community Alliance, where he coordinates the North American Taiko Conference and regional Taiko gatherings. Gregory went to UC Davis for undergraduate and graduate education, where he studied environmental science and archaeology and played Taiko with Bakuhatsu Taiko Dan, which is a student group at UC Davis. Gregory's work focuses on Taiko as folk music of Asian America and as music of protest, joy, and memory. Here he talks about the art and history of Taiko, the Davis Cherry Blossom Festival as third space, music as constructive program, or Satyagraha?
Satyagraha, yeah. Like Gandhian.
The North American Taiko Conference and new folk music. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. That was great. Kongo Gumi and Bakuhatsu Taiko Dan. I realize that there's weird words to see, but once you hear them, those are the two ensembles that you mentioned. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, beautiful words to me.
Yeah.
And I love learning, so it's beautiful even to try to pronounce them and hear the sounds. So my gosh, I have to ask you, when did you very, very um, earliest time touch taiko?
Oh, that's a great question because you mentioned, yeah, I was a student at UC Davis for my undergraduate and graduate education, and I did a lot of taiko, as much as I was doing school. But I think taiko for me was something that, it's something that as a, fourth generation Japanese American, it's part of the kind of the material and musical culture of Japanese America. But it's something that you may see at a Obon, one of the major Buddhist festivals, as an accompaniment to dancing, or in ensemble, like a bunch of drums playing together. So I think I actually, like, my connection to taiko probably starts as kind of just seeing it, like feeling it. It's a very powerful, loud instrument at such kind of festivals growing up. And I even got really interested in just the listening to the music. Like Kodo is like probably one of the more famous taiko groups in the world. And I was listening, to their albums when I was in high school. My family's originally from, well, I guess Orange County, where my parents were from. But we had moved to Utah when I was quite young. So I kind of, that dislocation from maybe like those centers of culture and those, the Japanese American kind of, family and community kind of events. Taiko to me kind of, I just love the music, and it's almost represented something that, like, oh, maybe if I had stayed in California, it's something I could have, done. But in Utah, there's groups in Salt Lake and Ogden, but we were kind of north of that in Logan, Utah, Utah State University. And coming to school at UC Davis, when I found out they had a taiko ensemble, oh man, I gotta try out for that. And I went through the tryout process and, made it onto the team. And let me tell you, that changed the trajectory of my life, because I've been playing taiko ever since then. And now I even work as an organizer for like taiko events. So I think for me, it was that kind of, knowing that music, but then like being able to really discover it through kind of a group like Bakuhatsu Taiko Dan. I think to me is one of, it's like a powerful story of kind of that reconnection and that building of traditions that I think a lot of taiko is doing as music, as social work too.
Wow. And you didn't even know UCD had a group?
No, I didn't. It was a real surprise to me, actually, when I found out they were kind of tabling on the quad. And so, hey, anyone listening to this, if you're a UC Davis student and don't know about them, check them out. Bakuhatsu Taiko Dan is the name of the group. And one thing that I found in, playing taiko with a bunch of other college students is, there are people who had played taiko before. There are people who, it's also their first time. But it was a really good chance to kind of meet different aspects of both the Japanese American diaspora, as well as other kind of Asian American kind of constructed identity spaces, as well as just, kind of a diverse range of experiences. So you have people like me, Yonsei, or fourth generation. So that means my great grandparents were immigrants to the United States. And, people who sometimes we say like Shin Nisei, or like new second generation parents who had came in post the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act. So I think Japanese diaspora in the United States is pretty interesting in that you have kind of a large amount of, or kind of relatively large amount of immigration in the late 1800s to early 1900s. But by the kind of 1918, 1920, there's maybe correct me. You can fact check the exact date. There's the gentleman agreement with Japan kind of shuts down immigration from Japan, and there's a lot of laws going on in California at the time. Immigrants couldn't own land. There was a lot of like legal pressure to make it so that it was inhospitable for immigrants to be able to to stay in the United States, and many of them didn't necessarily plan to. Some of them maybe did. A lot of them came for kind of economic reasons, but you have this disruption to the immigration pattern that, following these kind of, maybe familiar to us again, kind of xenophobic kind of pushes to stop immigration. So it kind of leaves this diaspora that's kind of disconnected, or maybe not disconnected, but it's very in time kind of discontinuous. Then you just stop immigration for a long time until post-war, until the 1965 Immigration Nationality Act, really what opens up Japanese immigration again. I mean, there's little bits in between there and stuff. But that kind of experience created a community that, had these traditions that came from a very old Japan, I guess, pre-war. And some of those traditions stayed in the communities. Some of them, there's assimilatory pressure to, particularly during the wartime, to lose those kind of cultural practices to fit in and to not, attempt to not, face kind of the discrimination that happened, with that, and the Japanese American incarceration. But then there's also kind of new traditions that I think, it's interesting to think about how this community is a people, a culture that kind of exists in its own history and its own, social context too. So to reconnect to a Japanese kind of American cultural heritage that it isn't just some connection to some antiquity, I guess, and it's not even a connection to modern Japan. It's a set of experiences that have been shaped very much by the American experience and by immigration, and the kind of ways that we as Americans deal with identity and belonging, right? Like that's, and so thanks for having me on your podcast about inclusivity. I think that is really this like through line to a lot of immigrant experiences, and that I think things like Taiko allow us to have those kind of conversations, or have at least the spaces for those conversations. And so many of the people we played with in Bakuhatsu Taiko Dan was, not all Asian American. I think I tried to do a little demographic at one point, just like kind of surveys within the group. I think about 80%, Asian American group, but within those, different Japanese American, Korean American, Vietnamese, Filipino, and kind of understanding how like this Asian American identity is constructed through our histories and through the kind of work we do to stay in community with each other. Yeah. So that was kind of my student experience with Bakuhatsu Taiko Dan. Yeah.
Wow, that's a you encapsulated a lot of history in a very short period of time. Gosh, and I the horrific incarceration of Japanese Americans for so long, that's I'm glad you focused on or pointed out the disruption and the discontinuity between the Americans who were Japanese who were here, and some of them were immigrants, of course, but the American Japanese people who were incarcerated, and then when they were allowed and it was legal, more people to come from Japan. That's just kind of fascinating to think about how the communities connected together after that separation by horrific mistreatment and incarceration.
Yeah, just like the depth to kind of these immigrant experiences too, right? And this is true in other diasporas as well. Mexican American, or broadly Latinx, kind of immigration happens over such a long period of time that I think there's just so much diversity to try to understand a diaspora. It really takes at least to sit with history a little bit, and to kind of understand where people are coming from. And I think, for Japanese Americans, I think. It's really hard to understand that experience without kind of centering, or at least, the experience of incarceration was, significant. It was traumatic. It was a source of, trauma, intergenerational trauma, but also, like land transfer, wealth transfer. It left people who were building kind of their lives to start over again. Right. And many of them, had to move, from maybe where they had settled down to different places as well. So, it's, and the legacy then to also to the redress movement, I think is an equally important part of that story to I think for if you kind of within the Japanese American, at least telling of this story too, Issei first generation and their children, Nisei second generation Japanese Americans, they did not like talking about the camp afterwards. It was not dignified. You have, you were sitting in toilet stalls without walls next to each other. It was a disruption of the traditional family unit where, like, when everyone's in camp together, the kids go and, all eat together and, kind of leave their, so what would normally be kind of a family, nuclear family was kind of, it's disrupted. Imagine just being with a bunch of other families and you're, a kid or something. You're going to go hang out with the other kids and stuff too. Which is, it just, I think especially for people who are, really working hard to make a life for themselves too, right? Like to be taken away from those businesses that they built, maybe the farms that they've spent, their life kind of building up too, right? To kind of face that indignity. It's hard to talk about too. I think shikata ga nai is like, it can't be helped. Is kind of one kind of maybe expression that we kind of remember from that time. Also, gaman, or like perseverance as like a value. These are things that I think made it hard to really, to talk about the experience of incarceration. But I think, and this is where I think Taiko has a really interesting history that I'd like to talk about too, is that I think, so Sansei, the third generation, so they're the children of Nisei who are Americans by birthright citizenship, but who were incarcerated during the war, who are, these Sansei, they're growing up in the 70s and, during the civil rights movement and kind of wondering about their parents' experiences. And there were vocal Nisei who were part of this. I don't want to over characterize the generations, but a lot of, Sansei activists who were part of, a third world movement and other kind of liberatory movements, as well as, people who were in the camps, who were brave and testified, I guess, about their experiences. They were able to pass, a redress legislation in 1980s, which, the government acknowledged the injustices of the incarceration and also paid, I guess, restitution to survivors and stuff too. But that process, I think, was fundamentally coalitionary, like to even have that legislation passed, or to have that recognition of that was wrong. It took a lot of work within the community, but also from other civil rights groups, other ethnic groups in the United States. The Congressional Black Caucus was like instrumental to getting that legislation passed. So I think to understand any kind of diasporic kind of experience in the United States, it's so just interlocked with, the policy regimes, but also just the different kind of players, the different kind of different peoples, right, who kind of form America. And I think Taiko, sorry to get back to that, was kind of this burgeoning kind of art form to represent, to tell that story of kind of this maybe politically conscious, new generation of Japanese Americans. You have people like Reverend Tom Kurai and like Kenny Endo, who's like now at the Taiko Center of the Pacific. But they went to this kind of first Manzanar pilgrimage, and they played drums. They were kind of making it up at that time, but just played the drums, and people would do this bone style dancing. That's from the Buddhist festival I mentioned earlier, where I first experienced Taiko music. And to kind of reclaim these spaces and what was once the Manzanar Incarceration Center, or the War Relocation Center, was not, it was, military barracks. There was no effort to really preserve that history until, there was this, movement by Sansei to get that site itself, recognized as a historical place. Yeah. And so kind of how the music becomes part of that story of, it's an aesthetic wing to maybe a civil rights kind of movement, I guess. And I think Taiko's kind of root in that, at least in Asian America, is something that I just want to, emphasize. And there's other, because there's Taiko going on in Japan. I could tell you a bunch more about Taiko history, but I've been talking for a little bit. Maybe I want to get back into focus in again, but it's just something I think is really important about Taiko music. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's really interesting, because I'm completely ignorant about Taiko, except for being able to see the incredible Cherry Blossom Festival that you organize, that we are like privileged to see here in Davis every year. So yeah, this is just all really good to learn. And I'm like, how much of, did I hear you correctly that a lot of the Taiko was developed, or styles were developed, Taiko styles in America, like distinct from what was developed, or like plays off it like any kind of music evolution?
Yeah, I need to be a little careful here, just because I think there's a lot of people who have a lot of strong opinions about this. I'm going to try to answer generally to like our
Okay.
our taiko players out there, our community and stuff too.
Okay.
Taiko, the way if you I'll try. I realize that there's a kind of a lot of history here. I'm going to try to just break it, a little bit simplistic. But taiko is used in a lot of kind of traditional musics of old Japan, right? From gagaku is this style of kind of imperial court music that comes from China, I think in like the 9th century or something. It's kind of old, right? And it's this style of music that's preserved through kind of like written compositions, I should say, maybe. But there's also kind of folk musics like dengaku or other types of kind of folk celebrations that use drums as as an instrument, to gather people. Some kind of legend or kind of like some like kind of folk knowledge, says that kind of the distance that you could hear a temple's drum was kind of like the boundary of like a town. Like, a drum was part of that time and that, and that culture and stuff. Bon style music, like I mentioned too, is something that we know, has had drum in it for a long time too. So there's all these, and Japan isn't even a monolithic kind of, country at this time. It's different, regions that have styles of music that are somewhat related, but unique and independent as well too. So taiko has these old origins, but in like theater too, like kabuki or no theater as well. But I think the style of taiko that you're probably used to seeing now, if anyone has seen taiko, you've probably seen a bunch of drums, a bunch of people playing together. And that's a style that we maybe sometimes more granularly call kumi daiko or ensemble drumming. And that's really interesting because that style we attribute to Daihachi Oguchi, a jazz drummer actually, who a Japanese jazz drummer in Japan, who the story kind of goes that he was asked to they had I guess music for how a piece would be played for a temple or a shrine, also a shrine, and he was looks at it and kind of has the idea that if we broke this, he uses this kind of jazz training to think about how if we could break this into different parts and have an ensemble play it and stuff too, and he really starts this very visually kind of striking way of performing where you have a bunch of people on stage playing drums all together, and so that in Japan there's this huge kind of explosion, I guess, of kind of taiko musics in Japan. I see. Do we need to take a break now? Okay.
Yeah, actually, if you can hold on to the rest of that description.
Yeah.
This is a good time to take a break. Sorry for the interruption, but we'll be back in less than 5 minutes.
Gonna keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on moving proudly. Keep on moving proudly. Keep on moving proudly. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on singing loudly. Keep on singing loudly. Keep on singing loudly. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on loving boldly. keep on loving boldly. Keep on loving boldly. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna reach across our borders. Reach across our borders. Reach across our borders. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna end the occupation. End the occupation. End the occupation. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna stop this war together. Stop this war together. Stop this war together. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Never turning back. 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 Never turning back.
Oh, sorry. I don't think I hear you, Bahia. Sorry about that.
Sorry, I just forgot to unmute. The name of that song was Keep On Moving Forward by the duo called Emma's Revolution. Just wanted to give credit for that awesome song,
Yeah, that's
which they
great.
generously gave us permission to use. So I don't remember if you knew where you were, Gregory, but
Ye-
you were
Yeah,
describing an explosion of music.
I was just going super fast, and I'm gonna maybe just for the sake of this podcast, slow it down a bit, take a bigger kind of chunks, big picture idea. So
Yeah, and
the
we
big
have
picture I was trying to.
about. Oh, sorry. I
Sorry,
just
go
want to let
ahead.
you know we have about 21 minutes. I want to make sure we get to show your beautiful photographs as well.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that. Keeping me on time. The big picture in Japan, I think you have this post-war society that is kind of trying to deal with questions about identity during the kind of this transition between the kind of occupied Japan and kind of what it's going to be in the future. And I think there's this interest in maybe like the folk music of Japan. So I won't get too much into names and dates and stuff too, but it's in the 50s, 60s. There's kind of these new movement or this new musical scene where you have people who are playing the kind of modern taiko, what we would maybe now call taiko. I think what's very interesting though is you have these kind of this not quite independent, definitely inspired by what's going on in Japan currently, but this kind of, similar movement that's going on in the United States to kind of make taiko what it is in this context. It probably helped both from the, Buddhist ministers who were studying in Japan who brought back some of that information with them, as well as people like Seiichi Tanaka from the San Francisco Taiko Dojo, who had went to Japan to actually study Taiko. He had immigrated actually prior. His wife was a Japanese American woman. They had met while she was in Japan. He came to San Francisco, and I think he was part of the first Northern California Cherry Blossom Festival, which, I'll leave a footnote there too. We're going to talk about the Davis Cherry Blossom Festival, but he's part of that, and he sees, it's missing something. And, being a young man growing up in Japan, he was kind of that Taiko scene was going on around them. He goes back to study Taiko in Japan and bring it to the United States. So it's both this intentional kind of immigrant kind of experience and I think this one beautiful thing that Tanaka Sensei kind of says is, he'd play Taiko and he would see Issei, so the people who had been through the camps, the people who had immigrated in the first part of the 20th century, who were just very appreciative to hear that style of music, and that what gave him kind of like motivation. The first couple pieces he writes are kind of dedicated to them. So you have this kind of new Japanese immigrant post. I guess actually I think he's just before that 1965 immigration law that allows a lot more Japanese Americans to come over. But the basic idea there is it's this dialogue between a new Japanese immigrant and an older Japanese immigrant, right? That's one of the loci for Taiko, and I think with the intention to bring Japanese Taiko to the United States. I think what's happening in like Los Angeles and the Kinara Buddhist Temple is very much more Japanese American Buddhist Taiko. Was Reverend Mas Kodani was more interested in making a music that represented their Japanese American experience and their Buddhist experiences. So it was important for him that it had, at that time they used hyphens, Japanese hyphen, American hyphen, Buddhist Taiko. It was not supposed to be something from another time or place, but kind of representative of the living Buddhism in the Americas. And then I think another kind of important origin is the San Jose Taiko is a group that's started by a couple people, including Roy and PJ Hirabayashi are maybe some, if you didn't know a couple, North American Taiko players, they're some of the early kind of pioneers of the art form. They were recently recognized as like National Endowments of the Art Heritage Fellows. And their program in San Jose, they have a kind of intentional design to have an Asian American Taiko. So a music that is kind of connected to the musical sensibilities that they have with them. I think, Roy played in a marching band kind of, before starting Taiko too. And I think there is kind of that desire to create something that is for Asian America, like a folk music for Asian America. So I think it's complicated, but basically the simple history that I, just for the sake of the podcast, is there's these different origins of something like Taiko. And I think what's interesting about it as a genre is it's kind of these things held in conversation. Like everyone has a different reason, I think, for playing Taiko. And that's something as a Taiko player, you kind of really learn to appreciate. I mean, you can kind of get that like in concept, but I think you really start to feel it, the more that you interact with different Taiko players from, all across, North America. There's a burgeoning scene, and it's been actually for a while in Europe as well. And this kind of global community that's kind of started around this kind of form of drumming too, and how all these different kind of histories kind of form what that music is, I guess. And how music can be a vessel to hold these conversations and these histories. So that's my short history section.
You are so knowledgeable. Well, let me ask you, what is your reason? Can you share with us, like, what is your reason and what's behind your passion and your excellent mastery level of playing Taiko, being a Taiko player?
I think for me, at first it's hard to maybe explain at first. I think a lot of people just have fun playing, and I think that's a super like valid reason too. But I hope that also leads to, as players kind of continue kind of more meditative kind of experiences to think about, their relationship to the art form. For me, it was this, like I had mentioned earlier, this almost this connection, this yearning for something that I felt disconnected from centers of, I would still visit my family every year. I'd be kind of in proximity to these Japanese American kind of cultural institutions, but being, physically in northern Utah, like to be kind of a super minority too, right? There's like very few other, Nikkei or Buddhist or even, Asian American in those communities, to kind of, at first it was just like this really fun way to just play music, to create, to embody different like feelings and through the performance as well. And those were all like just somehow like tied together. It's hard to really separate one from the other. It is both the kind of what it represents and stands for, and the kind of the friends you have, and how each of their stories are kind of shaped by these deeper processes of history, I guess, too. So it goes from this kind of just admiration and wonder, I suppose, of the style of music, to maybe something that is, I've been trying to use it to maybe have kind of more directed conversations, or to have things like the Davis Cherry Blossom Festival. We've used taiko in kind of in protest and social justice work, and to try to really continue that legacy of, I guess, the Asian American movement or the civil rights movement through music. And I think fundamentally where I'm at now as a taiko player is just thinking how important it is to have music as a sort of I guess third space, maybe even is maybe a way that you come into this space and are able to shed some of the identities or kind of labels even that you have before, and kind of really engage in a very kind of artistic kind of space too, and then to kind of re-examine your own identity and your own kind of relationship to others, I think, through music. I think that's a beautiful thing about music and about art. So that's kind of where I am now, trying to make that space for my students and for the communities that we work in. Yeah.
That sounds awesome. That third space, just all constructs just dismantled. It sounds very spiritual.
Yeah.
Internally.
It totally is. Yeah. This connection you feel with other people when you're moving and sounding together. I think it's very human. Yeah.
Yeah, moving and sounding together. Yeah, that's incredible. Well, let's hear your in our 12 minutes left. Let's give a minute or two to each photograph, because they're so beautiful.
Yeah, maybe if for anyone who's kind of watching to just kind of get a sense of what we're talking about. But this first picture is from Bakuhatsu Taiko Dan. So this is the student group at UC Davis, where I first kind of found my kind of taiko family, and kind of started my journey in taiko. And this is, I chose this picture because I think, well, this is a piece that I actually composed, but I think it shows Ameagari is the name of the piece. It shows like a kind of a different style. You see some saxophones in there, you see some flute, you see the drums and stuff too. And one thing as taiko artist that I really want to leave space for is that people come to these spaces with their own like musical sensibilities or musicalities, and how you can find ways to both kind of respect tradition, but also kind of acknowledge just like the kind of very complex and varied people we are too. So this was, I think a good example of, and I think collegiate taiko is great for that. You can experiment a lot. So this is kind of a experimental piece, and just to see the joy of, all these, student players. This is why I chose that picture. And then I think through playing with Bakuhatsu Taiko Dan, I had this experience where, we would play at a lot of different gigs. Sometimes it's like, an opening for a new restaurant, or it's an academic conference on campus, and you're providing kind of an entertainment there, or in like an international festival, and all these are like, great experiences. And I don't regret performing anywhere, even some of the crazier ones. It's a really good thing. But, oh, sorry, I know we're moving. But just what I want to say about Davis Cherry Blossom
That's okay.
Festival is that the idea is to kind of create a space where we could be the storytellers and invite others to tell a story. So the idea was to not just play in other places, but to be able to host people to let them kind of tell their stories through music. And this is us, the bone style dancing that I had mentioned earlier. This is a picture of, it's a circle dance. Everyone kind of makes a big circle around a yagura, or a kind of a platform in the middle, and they dance. This is piece Aja Naika. PJ Hirabayashi, who I mentioned earlier, is in the front there, actually. So she wrote this song, which is a story about Asian America, I guess, or Japanese immigrants, like through the lyrics and movements of the song. But yeah, we can keep moving. I know we're short on time, but
That's okay. But we also don't want to talk too fast either.
Oh yes, I'll slow it back down. Yeah. So yeah, we can kind of keep moving through these. I think through these types of experiences, this is a picture of Tanforan was one of the assembly centers where Japanese Americans were sent prior to be sent to inland, kind of the war relocation centers. They were sent to all these other holding areas, and one of them was a racetrack in Tanforan. And this was an event that we did to kind of commemorate and that history, to preserve that history, as well as it was a collaboration with Black Lives Matter. This was actually kind of immediately after George Floyd incident. And so, using taiko to bring kind of attention and healing and kind of, or just like solidarity, I suppose. So this is us using bone dance in that other context. And yeah, we can keep kind of moving through this. Similarly, this is a protest we did at the Yuba County Jail. This was for one of the ICE holding centers. So this is when immigrants were at the time being on civil charges, so non-criminal charges, being held, indefinitely in prison. So this was a kind of protest. We had to ask them or the Yuba County to end that contract with ICE. And that was a kind of a moving experience for us.
Wow.
And being able to hear them shout out from behind the prison walls that they can hear us, and to keep drumming and stuff. And similarly, oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's so moving. That's just, that's so powerful, and such solidarity.
And similarly here, this is from Bishop or Lone Pine. This is on the no, this is Bishop. Sorry, the Manzanar pilgrimage. We go to remember the Manzanar war relocation area. Just to save you a longer story, there was an incidence of racial profiling in which some of our pilgrims who go to this annually were turned away from accessing a local business, and the kind of Native American Numa, one of their, I think the Big Pine Paiute group, and just Native American activists in the area, Sage Romero, actually went out of his way to kind of welcome us to the area, and the whole local community kind of all rallied against that. That people should be welcome. All people should be able to go to any business here. So it led to this kind of collaborative that we've had every year with Sage and Aka Mya, his dance group down there. This is Kongo Gumi. This is the one of the advanced ensembles that we run out of the Koyasan, Northern California Buddhist temple. And this is, one of the kind of maybe post-collegiate or kind of young adult ensembles. We also have youth and adult classes. The youth ones I don't maybe share pictures as much too, but there is a large youth group as well too, students from 5 to till college as well. And this is just another example of this bone style dancing. This is at the Wakamatsu tea and silk colony. It's an early Japanese American site in North America. And this is Kongo Gumi playing the accompaniment, actually doing the whole arrangement for the bone music, singing. You can see our friend John there singing on a microphone. And then, some of us, I'm playing a shamisen, Katie's playing a flute, Morgan's there playing a shime. So, just being able to use this music in the world and stuff too. And this is, this next picture is kind of, this is a Taiko Taikai, is a competition that's something that's really new, started in Los Angeles. This was its second year, I guess, and I was a competitor in that. I think just the way that taiko is really becoming a very popular kind of form of music now too, it brings all kinds of new things to the community, such as like competitions like this. And particularly for this competition was a piece called Go for Broke, written by Tiffany Tamarabuchi from actually Sacramento. And Go for Broke is the slogan of the 442nd, was one of the Japanese American segregated units in World War II. So that's actually kind of
Wow.
an homage to them. So even thinking about how the way we costume and present the art doesn't necessarily have to be antiquity or this idea of Japan, but can really be about our experiences as Japanese Americans. Then the last thing, maybe I'll wrap up real quick. I'm the conference manager for the Taiko Community Alliance. This was an event we did in Hilo last year. That was everyone who went to a conference there. And then this next one too that you just showed is from a local obon there too. And we just got back from Seattle, where we did our annual one this year too. And as in this role, in the Taiko Community Alliance, I host the annual, or I help produce an annual conference, which Taiko players come together to to take workshops with professionals, to have concerts, to just be in community together, and seeing how Taiko just connects so many different lives in so many different ways. One really special thing about Hilo last year is we were able to, in this conference, all go to a local obon festival, and in Hawaii they really do obon real big. So I hope you can kind of just see the vibe and how it's a lot of people who gather for these. Yeah.
Wow, talk about social justice work through art. Wow, it's just so inherent and integrated in Taiko. It's just so powerful. I'm almost speechless. Thank you for describing all these examples. And that picture, we don't have to show it again, but I just want to tell you that's you in the competition. It reminds me of when you performed with your group at the recent artist share that the Creative Core team showed, which was incredible. Another local event by the Creative Core team. I think that was the Shakespeare Theater Company. Anyway, it seems like so athletic, like just like throwing your entire body and strength into that is just another thing that's incredible, just as an observer and witness of it.
Yeah, definitely. It's exercise too.
It looks physically exhausting, but also like you're so mentally in it. It's just
that connection, mind, body, spirit. I think that's really nice about Taiko. Yeah, that's a good observation.
Mind, body, spirit. Yeah. Wow. Well, we just have 2 minutes, and if you want to just give a closing thought, and then I want to have a 20 seconds to thank everyone.
Yeah, sure. Closing thought, just, thank you for having me. I think it's really nice to be having these conversations with artists. I want to just say real quick that everyone, the 10th anniversary of the Davis Cherry Blossom Festival will be this next spring. I can't believe it's actually been 10 years. This was something that I started as a student, actually,
Wow.
Way back in Bakuhatsu Taiko Dan. And this is, it'll be our 10th year this year. We're hoping to do something big for that. So, if you could look for that and come out, we'd love to, play some Taiko with you all.
Do you have a website? Can you just say it out loud for the listeners?
Yeah, I think it's GregoryWada.com. I have like a personal one that I try to put stuff up like that. The DavisCherryBlossom.org will also get you to our Davis Cherry Blossom, I believe.
Okay, it is so worth looking up, the DavisCherryBlossom.org. It's a powerful, powerful experience just being there. Well, thank you so much, Gregory. I so appreciate your depth of knowledge and history. I want to learn so much more. Thank you, Kenneth Arnold, for being our ASL interpreter and your hard work. And thank you, our engineer, Rebel, and our producer, Dean K. Piper. And thanks to all the listeners and viewers. And be sure to tune in next Wednesday at 8 p.m. on Talk4TV or w4cy.com. And may we all have more enriching conversations in diversity this week. Thank you.
Inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech